everybody. Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk Podcast. Final regular season game is upon you. There will be no playoff game, so I really don't have to differentiate. Phil Perry and I are going to get together today, and we're going to talk about the Patriots' final game. Who should play? Who should sit? Why should you play if you're playing? Why should you sit if you're sitting? Also, how the Patriots should approach this final game now that they're squatting on the first overall pick. Also, Hunter Henry will talk about Alex Van Pelt and the tenor of the team as it enters its final game and how it should enter 2025. But first, is Drake Maye talking about the Patriots' approach Sunday against the Bills. This is brought to you by Shaw's, perfecting the art of fresh.
I've never been a part of a team as a player or as a coach going into a game not wanting to win, and it's not going to change today. So that's my message to the team. Drake is our starting quarterback. If he's healthy and ready to go as we go through this week of practice, then he'll play.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the aforementioned Phil Perry alongside. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how you doing?
Give me the ball for a second. Now, we talked about this, so Phil understands it, that I'm going to do this. But, you know, the Patriots' entire season was about building a foundation. Okay? The final 4 games were about creating momentum. The work day is basically over. It's time to put away the tools, get ready for a fresh start tomorrow, i.e. next season. Don't get anything damaged here in the last 20 minutes of the workday. So what I'm saying is, if you were a ball carrier, you'd be saying to the team right now, know when the journey is over. Go down. Do not use Drake Maye, more than a glimpse or a cameo, if that. Get Hunter Henry off the field. Do not leverage and or jeopardize the most important offseason of Drake Maye's career for some virtue signaling effort to try and show people that you're grinding to the end. We understand it. You grinded. You got ground down yourselves. But to me, discretion's the better part of valor. The workday is over. The workday is over.
And Tom, I can't understand any approach where winning this football game and acting as though winning this football game is the most important thing for the franchise to do. And so Drake Maye, I think, has to say certain things at the podium. I do think, based on some of those comments, the door was still left open for somebody like Drake Maye to start in the game, but then not playing it, as you mentioned. Maybe you just see a glimpse of him. And that, to me, would be the right way to play it, if you play him at all. I just look at this, and you said the words virtue signaling, whether you're talking about just the integrity of the game or doing right by the game, or the word karma comes into play this week. I don't really have time for that this week. And the Patriots shouldn't either. They should understand what's at stake in terms of potential assets for building your future, and they should be consistent in that. You mentioned it. This season was about building a foundation and finding pieces for the future. Why would all of a sudden now be winning this game or have winning this game as the most important thing to you? I understand what Mayo's saying, but I'm not going there this week. You've done a fantastic job of losing all season long. Don't stop now.
Is Hunter Henry going to go out there and have 8 catches for 87 yards and you're going to change your mind? Or do you need Yaheem Bell out there? 7th-round pick, for those of you who might not remember that Yaheem Bell is a part of the team. He's a tight end the Patriots took. Pretty good athlete. I'd like to see him. Javon Baker, I'd rather see him running around for 45 plays, not catching the ball, being in the wrong spot, than I would Demario Douglas or Kendrick Bourne. You know what you got with those guys. So get those guys up. And, you know, the contention will be, especially since Bill Belichick articulated it this week, where you can't sit everybody. We understand that. We've actually said that for those of you who've been listening for a long time. Oodles of times. I'm very anti-tank. I'm very anti-sit guys in the preseason. But in this instance, the journey is over. And it is virtue signaling. And I think there'll be hardos out there who say, well, you know, you're playing favorites. No, you're making a realistic appraisal of how much good can come from anybody's performance on Sunday. To me, it is a drop in the ocean if you go off and have a great week. You can learn more by a guy who quits and say, oh, okay, well, this guy obviously decided not to play week 18. Screw him. But to me, that aspect is, it's a false pretense to base an argument, as is the pretense of, well, why didn't you sit him last week?
It's not like the football product has been so solid throughout the course of the year that you feel like you've got to be able to maintain something this last week. And I would also say there's very little to be gained, Tom. I don't even know if it's a drop in the ocean. There's so little to be gained because of what the Bills are going to be doing on the other side. They're not trying to win this game.
They don't care if they win or they lose.
You go out and you play well against Buffalo Bills backups in what looks like essentially a preseason game. You're going to take anything from that? Is that building momentum towards next year? Is that setting a standard? Is that helping your culture? I really don't think it is.
And I think that is actually that's the better way to approach this. For folks who would say, well, you're sending the wrong message. You're sending your team the message that it's okay to lose a game, that it's okay to give less than full effort. That's not what it is. Don't call it a tank, folks. This is not a tank. You put Joe Milton on the field, you put Javon Baker, you put Marte Mapu and Del Pettis out there. You run all those guys out there. You try to win. If you're on the 8-yard line with Joe Milton at quarterback and you're trailing 23-16 with 17 seconds left, good scenario. You try to score the touchdown.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
If you score the touchdown, okay, sorry, we're picking third. Okay, sorry, we're picking fourth. Or we don't get it, most likely, because we're not a good red zone team. But tanking would be kneeling in that situation. This isn't a tank. This is an asset manipulation, an asset management game.
Yes.
And having Drake Maye with a friggin' MCL injury sitting on his ass in April watching passing camp because they can't have him on the field would be absolutely stupid. So keep him out of harm's way.
Can I just say there are, I think, several good things that can come from this game without you winning it. Number one is obviously the first overall pick if you lose. And that's a real asset that you should want. It's okay to want that at this point because your team is where it is. It's so devoid of talent. The undertones to every comment made about where this team is situated in terms of its organizational trajectory all season long has been, we don't have the horses. We don't have the horses. Expectations were that we didn't win a single game. Vegas didn't pick us to win a single game. These are the kinds of comments that we've heard all year long, not only from Drake Maye, but from players as well who understand they're in the middle of a rebuild. So that number one pick in a year where you could either take the best player, where there might only be one true blue chip player in the top 5, or trade down and build up your assets, like that matters. It really does. Number two would be finding out about guys like whether it's Javon Baker, who I think we know about, or Jalen Polk, who I think we know about, or Caden Wallace and Cole Strange. I would mention those two names as actually being better examples. Great. If they can have a second decent performance in as many weeks, tremendous. The third thing would be Joe Milton. This would be the game, if you see Drake Maye for a couple of series, get Joe Milton out there, Tom, and talk about asset management. This is the Packer way. This is why you draft quarterbacks every single year. It's not to eventually play them necessarily, especially the later round guys when you already have a franchise guy. It's to spin them off for a pick. So what better opportunity are you going to have in essentially a preseason kind of environment to play a rookie quarterback who hasn't played all year, has all kinds of physical gifts? There are going to be teams going into the offseason that have quarterback needs. If Joe Milton goes off and has a Matt Flynnian kind of performance.
Matt Schaub.
Remember? Like,
any Matt.
Light it up. And then maybe see if you can get, even if you win the game, you might be able to get a pick for that guy. And that to me is worthwhile as well.
And I would say the contention is, well, why don't you start Joe Milton and have Drake Maye sit? And I would say that, yes, you could do that. I would not pick it outside the stadium if they did that. But I do think that there's merit in seeing how the Bills are playing the game before you sit Maye down. Just in terms of, okay, see how it's going out there, Joe? All right, you ready? So they're doing this. They're playing very basic, very vanilla. Instead of putting him out there and saying, oh, my God, they're doing chaos blitzes and trying to win the game with their backups, and Joe's not ready for that. Put Jacoby Brissett out. I mean, but do you get what I'm saying? Maybe it's a little bit of a stretch.
If you're really trying to set up Joe Milton for success, that what you're talking about in terms of maybe sitting him to start might be the best path.
I would use Maye for a series or 2 series, and then party's over.
Do you think if they do that runs counter to what Drake Maye said today?
No.
Do you think he looks bad?
No.
In
no.
hindsight?
He said he's our starting quarterback. He's going to start the game. I think. Listen, we've been hard on Gerard, our former podcast co-host, our former Quick Slants co-host, we've been really hard on him. And I think that, especially after this last week, we've been hard on his messaging, especially later in the year. We've called it to task. And I didn't like the post-hit tenor around Drake Maye last week. And I know you didn't either. I heard you on the radio. To take a hit on the sideline the first quarter and to release the football, as you pointed out very well, involuntary releasing the ball because your body said, oh my God, I have to spend all attention on the trauma that just happened to my head, is a signal that you have sustained a brain injury. Mild though it may be, you're able to pass concussion tests. But that's the number one asset. And the Patriots, the medical staff, the independent evaluator, and the coaching staff, and Drake Maye himself all said, I'm going to get back out there. Okay, but he could have taken another missile shot to the head, and we know that those compound. So to me, that was a mismanagement of the most important asset on the team, discretion being the better part of valor. I think in that instance, I don't care that Drake Maye wants to play. So I'm a little dubious as to their asset management in terms of how Mayo did it last week and the team did it last week. And if I'm ownership, after doing this for 30 years, I might have knocked on the door and said, hey, really don't want to see that kid in a bad position. Do you? I mean, really, come on. We got to understand our situation here, okay? Do what you're going to do, but you're my manager of those assets. And, next week, I really don't want to see guys in harm's way who don't need to be, because next year is even more important if you want to be back. Did I say if you want to be back? No, you're back. Don't worry about it.
We walk those comments back.
I was inferring the crass without the X.
Yeah, I know. That's the first time you've done that in a long time. I want to ask you something before I know we got to move on and talk about the coaches really quickly. Mayo did say that those conversations about who's playing and who's not playing haven't happened this week ahead of the Bills game. Should they be happening?
Oh, my God, yes. And this is another instance of, looking at standing there looking at storm clouds and not grabbing an umbrella. Where's the planning? Have this shit organized miles before you get to the place. It's like another metaphor, pulling out the map when you're a quarter mile from the exit. Are we taking this one? It's the same stuff that goes on, which brings us perfectly into the next point that we want to get into, which is coaching. And I want to revisit this play, or visit it for the first time in depth. The first play of the football game offensively for the Patriots last week, playing the Chargers. After the Chargers had the ball first, it was a TV timeout. Patriots take the ball, 1st and 10, 35 seconds on the play clock. First thing is, Kendrick Bourne wanders from the right side of the formation to the left side of the formation and sets up next to Hunter Henry. Drake Maye looks at him and points, and Kendrick Bourne turns his hands up to the sky as in, what do you mean? Hunter Henry then looks at him and tells him to get on the line, meaning get properly aligned. He doesn't do that, so Hunter Henry moves up. And then Maye signals him back to the right side where he initially came from. So Kendrick Bourne scurries over there. By the time he gets over there, Demario Douglas, who split out wide to the left, starts pointing back, as in, I'm not sure what this confusion is. Are we still doing the same thing? They snap the ball. They hand it off to Antonio Gibson, who runs for like 5 yards off left guard.
Ramondre Stevenson, I think, right?
Was it Stevenson? I shouldn't even get that wrong.
It should have been Gibson, according to what Maye was telling us before the game.
It's a great point. That's the other level of communication. So we look at this and we say, okay, we can blame it on Mayo that after a week of preparation, the first snap of the game, they have chaos going on at the line of scrimmage. No one knows what to do. We can blame it on Alex Van Pelt and say, well, how can the players not be prepared? We can blame it on Tyler Hughes, the wide receivers coach, to say, how can these guys not be ready for the first snap of the game? You can blame it on Maye for not, articulating it properly in the huddle. You can blame it on Kendrick Bourne. But to me, I'm going to start with Kendrick Bourne. I have to start with Kendrick Bourne. And I think that what we've heard from the team, I have to get to this sound right now, is that they don't want to see Alex Van Pelt go anywhere. Here's Hunter Henry on Alex Van Pelt today.
There will be changes, obviously, in a locker room and on a year-to-year basis, but there still will be a carryover of guys. And so when you can carry over an offense into an offseason, you can kind of sometimes build upon it in a lot of ways. I've loved AVP. I've loved the energy. I've loved the offense that he's brought here. I really do think it's a great scheme, and I think there's a lot of room for growth with everybody with it.
Phil, following that press conference with Hunter Henry on Wednesday, I was in the locker room speaking to an offensive player, and he basically said the same things that Henry was saying and added in the last thing that Drake Maye needs is to have to learn a whole new language and a whole new offense with all the progress he's made in this situation. First, address the job done and whether or not you think this is a coach who deserves to be on the griddle as much as he seems to be.
I think he deserves it in that the offensive performance overall hasn't been good, as much as the quarterback has developed. And that's a really important of Alex Van Pelt's job this year. It's about, I would say it's probably 50% of his job, and it's probably the more important 50%. And so I give him the check mark there. I really do. The other part of his job is things like having players organized and having the message disseminated clearly and sequencing play calls and having a reason why you're calling things when you're calling them.
I want to go back to that, managing players, before we talk about the other things, because the sequencing, the communication, and the play selection, all I think are worth talking about. But he himself has said that he's improving as a play caller. But the managing, I think if you were in charge of something and I was your boss and the people under you kept screwing up, I'd say, I'm sorry, buddy, but I've told you since April that can't happen. We're going to be moving on and getting somebody else because I can't fire all those guys. But somehow you're not getting through. And if I'm talking wide receivers or offensive line, you can't fire all the players. Just like you can't fire the owners, you can't fire all the players. So I would have to make a move at head coach. And I don't think, at positional coaches, I really scrutinize the shit out of those guys and say, who's really holding us hostage? And the wide receiver room is holding them hostage because they're not void of talent. The offensive line might be. The wide receiver room is not void of talent, and they don't go to the right places, catch the football. They're emotionally immature, and I think that Tyler Hughes is in over his head.
I think that is based on what we've seen. I think that's a fair assessment. I don't know how you could really argue otherwise. It's just been such a mess at that spot. And how consistently do we see these receivers end up in what looks like the wrong spots, and veteran guys included? Kendrick Bourne. It's almost a weekly occurrence with him. Jalen Polk every time he's on the field.
He might be the biggest offender, whether it's illegal formations, false starts, in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then saying with a happy smile because we love him and then appreciate his smile. He's got a beautiful smile, lights up a room, but it's on me. I know it's on you. I mean, Jacoby Myers should be here. Go ahead.
So what I would say is he deserves to be on the hot seat. Alex deserves it. He does. Third down performance, red zone performance. You've got a good quarterback, and you can't win games with a good quarterback. And I understand the personnel everywhere else is really bad. It might be the worst in the league. But the quarterback play has been pretty good, and you still haven't been able to figure out how to put points on the board. I look at things like, and I'm sorry, I know I've been, like a dog on a bone with this. But the design quarterback run thing is a real problem for me. They are desperate to score. They're desperate to move the chains, and he just won't do this thing that helps them be a better offense. And then suddenly at the end of the year, it feels like his hand gets forced because he tells us 3 days before Buffalo that they're still not planning on doing it. And then lo and behold, they actually do it. And they use it in a critical situation. They convert on 4th down.
And then next week he gets a bop on the head and he gets to say,
not in a design run situation.
I know, but still.
So he deserves to be scrutinized heavily. Does he deserve to be fired? I think what you're talking about and the consistency of the coaching for the quarterback itself has to be really heavily weighed here. And I think you have to look at your potential options right? Because it's not just a firing and an immediate upgrade with the coordinator X.
Of
You have to know
course,
who
you're
coordinator
exactly
X is. Who is that person?
Don't
and is
change
he better,
for change's sake.
Is he better for the quarterback and for the overall organization? I don't know the answer to that question. They can't know it either, which makes it hard for them. They even know who's available or who's willing to take the job?
Or what the parameters of the contract would be, or what the parameters of the interaction with the coaching staff might be. Because if you're going to hire somebody to be an offensive mind here, they better be friggin' experienced, more experienced than Alex Van Pelt. They better know how to develop somebody like a Dayball, like a McDaniels. If you brought one of those guys in, they're not going to come in here after having been coaches for all this time and sit there and say, well, I'm just going to stand here. You can give me whoever you want, position coach-wise, player-wise. No, they have sway and should have sway, and they should have a voice if those were the individuals. And if it's not individuals like that, well, it's certainly not going to be Ben friggin' Johnson. Oh, yeah, definitely. I want to go. People are crazy. Well, so identify a good quarterbacks coach around the league. Well, you sure he's going to be better than Alex Van Pelt? Because maybe he is a genius. Maybe he is Dexter's Lab sitting there. I love Dexter's Lab, by the way. Did you ever watch Dexter's Lab?
Nickelodeon?
Yeah. In Dexter's Lab.
I think that was past my time.
You were too old
I think
for
so.
it. Fit perfectly with my kids.
I was more Pinky and the Brain aged, I think.
Yeah, my kids got
Some
a
of that
little
was
bit
pretty
of
good.
that tail end. But even that individual better have more sway than the 52-year-old, cool as a cucumber, former NFL quarterback who's cuddly and isn't walking around trying to be a big old swinging Richard in the locker room. There is so much to recommend to Alex Van Pelt. But as another writer said to me today, who I have great respect for, yeah, I kind of thought it might be over when I saw Jonathan go like this.
Up in the box.
Yeah.
And in Phoenix and talking about
Just
the
the
play
exasperation.
calling. Yeah.
The exasperation of ownership.
I
But
mean,
you better have an answer.
You have to have an answer. That's the thing. And Tom, one of the guys who I think was among their first choices last year, if not their first choice, and came to Foxborough from L.A. to interview for the job, was Nick Caley. And we know Nick Caley, and Nick Caley's a smart guy, and Nick Caley's worked for really smart people, both here in New England and now in L.A. And I'm sure he would have really good ideas as to how to run an offense. But he's not what you're talking about. He's not Mr. Experienced quarterbacks coach.
Show me who he's developed.
He's not Mr. Experienced play caller. So, he hasn't had those jobs.
Everybody's got to start somewhere. Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, maybe Nick Caley will be that guy. But I continue to look at the inexperience of the coaching staff, the immaturity, at least learning immaturity, and emotional resilience at times of some of the players. And when I say that again, I'm going back to wide receivers. And you need adults in the room, and Alex Van Pelt serves as that. Flipping now to that, the tenor at the end of the season. Hunter Henry, again, he had a great press conference, A+ press conference from him. Here's Hunter Henry speaking about the end of the season and players being disappointed at the results of what's gone on.
I mean, it's a big offseason. I mean, if you have that kind of mentality, I mean, you should attack the offseason with that same mentality, that same rigorous thing. Like we should approach, I mean, everybody should be tired of that. And you should approach every single thing that you do with those details, with that fire. Because, I mean, obviously, I'm in my 9th year. I mean, you think I want to go through a season like this? I don't. Obviously, something's got to change. And I think it's all just maybe a mentality thing. Maybe it's just a consistency thing. So this offseason will be big for everybody.
Phil, this team is on the verge of being a hapless one. Meaning, yeah, it's hapless. It's 3-14. But after 4-13, after 8-9, it's entering the territory of you are what you are, and we're a bottom tier team. This is not a team in a dip. This is not a team that is parading around. It is very far removed now from its glory days to the point where its identity is bad team.
No
That's
question.
the identity. So how do you shake that identity?
I think you have to have real leadership in there that helps just change the standard, because the coach is one thing, and that will matter for Gerard Mayo if and when he's back for his second season, setting a standard which I don't think really has been set this year. I mean, he keeps talking about how players have come back and they're working, and that's a good thing. But I remember players saying the same thing about the team last season, and it wasn't necessarily they were doing that because the head coach was, fighting for his job. It was because they were fighting for jobs, and they didn't want to put each other in bad spots. So the guys who were playing hard at the end of the year, it really was, the ones I spoke to, it really wasn't necessarily for Bill Belichick. It was for each other. It was for their next gig. And I think the same thing's happening this year. I don't know how you could look at it and say, well, that's because of Mayo that these guys are playing hard.
That occurred to me, and I want your answer. We can agree that this team right now is probably playing worse than the Patriots of 2023 were at the end of the season. But is this team's culture and functionality worse now than it was at the end of last year? Because I think it was more dysfunctional and morose last year.
I would agree. And I just think even, on the coaching staff, the lack of communication. Now, listen, there's been evidence to suggest, i.e., Ramondre Stevenson over Antonio Gibson to start that game over there, that there's not a lot of communication between the coaches right now. But I think it was really dysfunctional on the staff last year. I think that bled into the locker room. It was dysfunctional at the quarterback position and in the quarterback room. And I think that bled into the locker room at large. I'm not totally sure that this team is playing worse, even after 40-7. Are they playing worse than last year's team? I would say defensively, this year's team is playing worse. Offensively, just by dint of having Drake Maye,
they're way better offensively.
It's so much better.
I hate to say it, they are way better offensively. They can pull off explosive plays. And this shit's been going on for years, too. I mean, Damiere Byrd in 2020 had a 45-yard touchdown catch in some game. And why do I remember that? Because that's like the last explosive play I remember from this team. Honest to God, can you come up with another explosive play from 21, 22, 23?
Well, I mean, they've had a couple of those long Kayshon Boutte touchdowns.
This year,
Kendrick Bourne. Yeah, this year. Oh, you're saying before this year.
In the last 4 years.
Before
20, 21, 22, and 23.
Okay.
I think Damiere Byrd's touchdown in 2020 from 45 yards away might be the last explosive play. You actually see multiple 20-plus yard plays from the Patriots this year. Offensively, they are much more scintillating, might be.
After a 7-point performance. I mean, they had an explosive touchdown this past week.
That was the Damiere Byrd
Chuck
touchdown.
And duck. Chuck and duck
and
last
that was
week.
the same Damiere Byrd touchdown. But, yeah, they were more disciplined and knew where the hell to be much better last year.
I think that's fair, too. I don't remember the same – there were spacing issues last year. I remember it coming up with people talking about Bill O'Brien's offense, but it doesn't feel like it was to this degree. Pre-snap stuff. I mean, that you mentioned that. I'm so glad you brought up that first play of that game last week. The end of that play is almost as entertaining to watch as the pre-snap stuff because at the very end, Ramondre Stevenson gets tackled and Hunter Henry whips around to Kendrick Bourne and gives him one of these. You almost never see that from Hunter Henry on the field. But it's like, come on, bro. It's the first play of the game. How do you not know where to be? I'm reading into I have no idea what was communicated there. But he clearly goes at Kendrick Bourne right as soon as that play is over.
That's really funny because I was saying to a player today in the locker room that I give you guys credit because I haven't seen anybody all season long, no matter how dysfunctional it's been, turn around after a play and put their palms to the sky and say, what are you doing? He did?
I don't know if it was palms to the sky necessarily or if it was a point as to you got to be there or you got to know what to do. There was something communicated there to that effect is what it looked like. I don't want to put words in Hunter Henry's mouth, but that's how it looked. And it, again, rare instance between, guys that have the right to do that, I would say are Hunter Henry, Drake Maye, I would give the right to do something like that. We haven't seen it from him. And so, maybe Micah Wenu, I guess,
he
potentially because he's out there a lot and he has played good football in the past, even though this hasn't been a great year for him.
Well, you don't have to be good to be in the right place at the right time.
And to expect it from others.
I mean, that was my football career.
You would have hated me. I was the guy in the huddle all the time asking, what am I doing in this play?
I knew every friggin' position. I knew tailback because I was dying to run the ball because I was an elusive runner. But no,
I could see that.
I had to put my hand up so I could play end because I thought I'd be a wide receiver. No, I was tight end in the wishbone at 121 pounds.
They did, thankfully, give me the flexibility to convert the route. So we ran a lot of hitches on the outside. If I thought I could run by the corner, just run by, put my arm.
Do you guys know that Phil was a really, really good
Mailbox.
high school football player?
Yeah, really, really good as strong.
You
I
must
didn't
have
play
made-
college football. If you really,
But
really
you
good high school
could've.
football players play college football.
Nah, that's not true.
I just like doing the mailbox thing. I
Phil
like
went to
calling it
BC
mailbox.
High. He was a tremendous receiver.
Again, tremendous strong. We didn't put up a lot of numbers offensively that year. Well, I just had Jack Shields going to the Hall of Fame. Congratulations to Jack Shields.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, fellow receiver, just a beast of a human being as a young guy, and then went on to play center. Think about that transition. Receiver as a freshman in high school for the varsity because he was that good an athlete and he was that big, and then became, I believe, the starting center at UVA
Virginia?
for multiple years. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, great guy too.
All right.
Anyway,
On that
we had
note-
good guys, good humans.
Hey,
We weren't very good at football, though.
we're going to have another pod after the game on Sunday. It'll be interesting. We'll have, I'm sure, given the tenor of this season, we'll have much to talk about regardless of the outcome. And make sure you catch us for pregame live, postgame live, Phil's Next Pats podcast, of course, as always. And we appreciate you. Happy New Year. Thanks for being with us. Not sure if you're watching this on TV, which camera to look at, but you're terrific. You know what? I think that's like some kind of sign, too. I can't do that anymore either.
I think you're right.
Happy New Year.